And yet at the same time, you could look at the vast pattern of history, and you could see that, that there was a strong indication that something was maneuvering things toward a particular directed end. And yet there was no possibility in my mind, after following all of these many trails, that this could be a human conspiracy, because human beings simply can't conspire over thousands of years. They can't keep something going that long. They work on immediate reward. They want, cause and effect. I'm going to do something, I want my reward in this lifetime. And so there's just no possibility that any of these conspiracies could be human originated. And that was where I was for a long time. And then I began to think about manipulations from other realities. And then, of course, it was when I got into my channeling experiment, because I was very frustrated at that point, because I could go no further. I mean, I had pretty much exhausted everything. I had exhausted the normal avenues of information, and I had exhausted the so-called, paranormal avenues of information. And I kept coming up against that funny thing that Charles Fort said. He says, "I think we're property," and that struck me. That is exactly how it appears when you look at this vast sweep of history. It's as though we're one big experiment.
Well, and who is perpetrating the experiment?
Who perpetrates it?
Yeah.
Well, I would suggest that it is denizens of this other reality that are referred to by the ancients as gods, and nowadays, of course, they may refer to them as aliens. I don't think they're aliens. I don't think they come from other planets. I think they're hyperdimensional beings, and I think that they've been here for many thousands of years, if not for all of human history. There are records of lights in the sky and strange beings that are similar to, what are called aliens down through history. Jacques Vallée referred to it as a control system, hyperdimensional reality. It's pretty much the same thing.
I'm just wondering why they would appear to be so fascinated with us, especially over such a long, protracted, amount of time. I mean, clearly, I don't know what their intentions are, so it's difficult to try and gauge that, even if they do have intentions like human beings have intentions. But what do you, hypothesize is the reasons that people might want to manipulate us in this way? Or, sorry, beings might want to manipulate us in this way?
Well, the evidence strongly indicates that we are food for them.
And what evidence suggests that?
Well, the evidence of, say, for example, wars and plagues and famines, and and I'm not saying that we're physical food necessarily. I'm saying that, energetic food, emotional, that pain and suffering is something that they feed on, that gives energy to them, just as the movie The Matrix, said that people were in pods and that their emotional energy produced energy for the system, for the machine, that they were batteries. It's very similar, that we are in essence a power supply.
Well, if I don't know, the human way of maybe responding to something like that, or maybe analysing it scientifically, typically is to try and look for perhaps an example within our universe. So to look at maybe, a microcosm within, I don't know, the flora or the fauna that we research. And I can't think of anything, and I'm sure you'll correct me, or at least an example within our universe of, an ecosystem that behaves in that way, where, you put things kind of under stress rather than just eating them or devouring them. It seems...
Think of the cat and the mouse. What does the cat do with the mouse?
Plays with the mouse.
Is it necessary for the cat to play with the mouse before it eats it?
No, it's not. That was that's a very obvious example, isn't it? A very good example. So, is the point then that they need to kind of maintain us and keep us here and keep us going as a food source in the same way that we try and sustain our own food sources?
More or less, and I think that in many respects they cut us some slack. They make sure that we know enough to create a civilization, to feed that civilization, to build that civilization up, to increase the numbers of people in that civilization, and then to put people into conflict with one another so that they fight and kill one another, so that there is, massive pain and suffering.
And do you find this, I mean, having come to this conclusion, do you find that, I don't know, a depressing thought, or do you think it's empowering because, it removes us maybe from some of the ways of thinking that humans have had and kind of been stuck to over the millennia? I mean, how do you feel having come to that conclusion?
Well, in the beginning, it was extraordinarily depressing, as you might imagine. And, I mean, it was, somebody asked me, after all these years, what have you learned? And I said, well, I've learned that there's no free lunch in the universe, and if you think there is, then you're lunch. And also, we are not at the top of the food chain. And that was pretty depressing for a period of time. And then I finally began to work my way through that, and I went back and started searching the literature for the evidence of anyone who had found their way out of this, had they realized this situation, had they understood it, what clues were there, and what conclusions did they come to, and was anybody able to overcome it, to escape it, so to speak. And clearly there are individuals in history, and you'll notice that the book has a thread all the way through it of alchemy, that I believe that alchemists were among those who were able to not only come to understand the system, but were able to step outside of the system, to be able to access hyperdimensional realities, because all of these things that these special powers that so-called alchemists were able to achieve have to do with mastery of space and time, which is what you achieve when you achieve the ability to step in and out of the hyperdimensional realities. So there are alchemists, there are some types of yogis, there is the ancient material that was brought to the West by Gurdjieff, by Muraviev. There's some very ancient literature that speaks to these matters and talks about people who have escaped, and that's why there's a subtitle to the book, and how to get out alive, because I do address that. I mean, I don't want to tell somebody, hey, you're in one hell of a situation, without telling them that there is a way out. And the way out is not in believing your way out, because believing your way out is what they want you to do. As long as they can get you to believe something, as long as they can invoke your faith in some pie-in-the-sky idea that you're going to change your reality by believing it, or you're going to get raptured to heaven when Jesus comes, or when the Mahdi comes, or whatever, that keeps you complacent. But
we live, in that case then, we live, at least, I would imagine it's the same in the States and in France where you're at the moment, but certainly in this country, we seem to be living in an increasingly secular society. We're an increasingly less complacent society, and fewer people subscribe to those points of view. So what is the belief system that we have at the moment that makes us fodder for these hyperdimensional beings?
I would say that I don't necessarily agree with you. Now, I'm from the United States, and I lived in the Bible Belt. And if you notice, George Bush has a great deal of support among fundamentalist Bible believers who actually believe that if they push the envelope on Armageddon, it will force Jesus to come and rapture them. They really believe this. I don't know if you have anybody in your family who subscribes to these types of beliefs, but I do. And they sincerely, truly believe that. And interestingly, the ideas of the rapture originated in Wales. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. But
No, I didn't know that. No.
Yes, they originated, and they originated in some fundamentalist type churches that went into some charismatic type activities that were accompanied by strange phenomena, including lights in the skies. At the same time, all over England, there were strange sightings of black cats, black dogs, and other unusual, what you would call hyperdimensional window fallers, creatures that would slip between dimensions. So it was an extremely unusual event that this belief system was introduced there at that time, accompanied by these types of events, which is once again a little bit of evidence of the hyperdimensional manipulation.
Okay, but I would still maintain, I mean, obviously within my experience, yes, there's no one in my family who has those kind of fundamentalist views, but I would suggest that even those, the people who hold those views in the Bible Belt in the States, it's still a minority of the population. I'm just wondering when there's that kind of spiritual void, if it's that kind of thing that these beings feed off, and we're becoming more, less complacent, as it were, then we're kind of failing as a food source.
Well, I don't think we're failing.
What will they do about that?
Because it's as much a belief. Science is as much a religion as Christianity is. And you can believe all you want in the power of science, and it's not going to save you if you don't acknowledge that science itself has its limits.
Okay, well, yeah, but there's a rationality to science that, well, at least, I don't have experience of it any other way, that kind of precludes it from forming the kind of conflict that you're talking about, though, that these beings feed off. Maybe I'm focusing too much on this idea that it's the conflict that these beings feed off. If we're becoming, clearly there's examples in the world at the moment where there appears to be more conflict than there has been before, but we're a more peaceful planet, aren't we, as a whole, than we've been at most points in the past.
Are you living in the same world I'm living in?